reduce the risk or transfer the risk. So this is what we call the risk decisions, right? And these decisions can't be made, right, if you do not have those elements of reporting, monitoring, consultation involved. Yeah. So I guess that's something that I hope to leave with the audience in this podcast. And once again, thank you very much for inviting me.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Engatica's interview series. I'm your host, Jacob Bollinger, and we're really glad to have you join us today. And today we have Andeed Ma, President and Chairperson of Governing Council of Risk and Insurance Management Association of Singapore, and a cloud business leader. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, Jacob.
Hello. The Engatica interview series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from around the world, a platform that provides the latest news on AI, automation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. Come be a part of our community, learn, share, and grow with us. So Andeed, let's just jump right in with, Can you talk a bit about risk management in AI and what are some of the risks that we need to be cautious about before deploying solutions powered by AI models?
Thanks, I think once again for inviting me, and this is a very, very important topic as well, because I think AI has went through two winters, in the past, in the 1950s and back in the 1990s as well. But what I think the ecosystem has been looking at AI is there's a potential that it might go into another winter if we do not take care of some of the existing risk, right? And this is where risk management in AI is exceptionally important. And I would like to start off saying that risk management itself is trying to look at the results or the effects of uncertainty, say, on an objective that we all want to achieve. And in this case, by using AI. And I also want to highlight the fact that results can be positive and it can be negative. So any deviation from the expected, right, is what we term as a risk. And sometimes a risk can be an event, right? Sometimes it can be a change in circumstances or consequence due to AI, right? And I think a lot of times people are not looking at consequence itself, because consequence analysis is a very deep thing. And I would definitely say that in risk management, we want to help stakeholders to create and protect the value. So in this case, AI is trying to bring out some form of value, right? And in any projects, in any ideas that a company or an individual is trying to generate, risk management is here to create and protect it. And you can't have, building an AI project without thinking about what sort of risk appetites, right, that you are intending to take on, because there's so much risk in the world, right? And I will always teach some of my C-levels, right, especially in the board meeting as well, the importance of defining the risk principles, because the risk principle itself helps organization to look at how to improve performance, right? How to encourage innovation and ultimately support the achievement of objectives. And with the principle sets, right, it will actually comes down to frameworks that the team will execute and processes that will help to keep check. And I think that's really the best I could illustrate what is risk management in AI, but I'm sure there's a lot more that I would love to share with the audience some days. And what happens if we don't do this, right? What are some of the risks and that we need to really be cautious on your second point? I would think that always starts with data, right? Especially when it comes to AI. We have the right data set for the right outcome we want to achieve, as the outcome is highly dependable, sometimes from what you collect, right? So that's really the one risk that I will put as priority when someone is embarking onto an AI project. And number two is really leadership and risk appetite, I mentioned previously. Finally, people, process, and technology risk. So these are all encompassing and has to be continuously practiced, right, in order for risk management in AI to be always be in the watch. Yeah. So that's a long answer for you, Jacob. I hope the audience gains something out of this.
No, and I think that's very valuable, trying to not just immediately go for the shiny technology and truly understand like this is what we're embarking on. So just as kind of a follow-up, you mentioned like processes that people should like think about before, or processes to help minimize that risk. Could you elaborate a little bit more on like what are some of those processes that just a couple of them that you encourage people to at least think about or consider before they like embark on some AI solution?
Sure. I think at the very early stages, I think things are fluid and agile, right? I would say we would have to manage our expectation, knowing that we need constant recording and reporting of the current status, right? If we need help, we need to consult experts, and we need to communicate down to the leadership, right? And finally, I think the third external factor we need to continuously put in place is review and monitoring, right? And these three pieces that I just mentioned would actually form a very good defense, right, around how you're building your AI project, because your AI project will have already set out a scope and a context and a set of criteria. And I think as a risk practitioner, we always talk about how to continuously assess the risk, right? Assessing risk involves identifying the risk. Earlier on, I mentioned, right? So the uncertainty, you need to identify it, analyze it, evaluate the consequences, and decide on what kind of treatments, right, do you want to put in place onto those identified risk. So that is fundamentally risk management in AI, and it could also be risk management in anything.
Okay. Yeah, I find it's really interesting that you mentioned this like communication barrier between like the people, technical experts, and also decision makers and consumers. Indeed. Yeah, that has been a reoccurring theme. We've had several experts on, and every single one of them, we had a technical lawyer on, we had this very just business C-level oriented person, and they all talked about how important communication is. So and so speaking on that kind of communication of AI models, how would you approach fixing the biases that are introduced into AI models if these biases are just inherently present in large training sets of data that we use to train them? And to kind of jump off that, how do you ensure fairness and ethicality in AI-powered applications?
In my career, I've been observing, the real problem is really that AI models are learned from data sets. Like what I mentioned earlier on, the priorities is around the data that we are using. And when there are implicit biasness in the training data, for example, if you're using a machine learning algorithms to teach computers to recognize faces of two different ethnic backgrounds, right? It could be a Black African and a white Europeans, and perhaps both are living in Europe, right? And the computer would just display, or classify African as European. So what this means is, we probably need a lot more diversity, right? To be included into the data set that we plan to train, right? We also might need to put in suitable weightage of data, right? Because there is the issue of fitting a model on raw data, which what beginner AI scientists will do, right? Where they fit standard models onto raw data. But you see, fitting on the raw data will result in very bad performance, because say 99% of your examples in the data set belongs in one class, right? For example, the Europeans. Then the standard model fit on this data set would essentially focus attention on the majority class and at the expense of the minority, right? So 99% accuracy doesn't mean anything, because you have already created some form of bias, right? So what we really need to do is to improve this data collection process, data cleansing processes, through more granular labeling of attributes within the models, right? And I strongly believe that there should be initiatives to establish a baseline of, for example, sensitive topics, how we label ethnic groups, right? And like I mentioned, gender, diversity, classification, additional attributes into the algorithmic model, right? And these are all topics that we talk about in algorithmic risk management as well, right? And with that leads to the part about fairness, right? So fairness is really around everyone gets treated the same, right? Which means a computer can't use race or gender to decide if someone is better, should be better treated or is better, right? And ethics really means that we can build this application without worrying that they will do bad things, right? So we can now then understand why risk management in AI is so important, because we can develop this risk principle around what are termed as acceptable risk, right? That will lead to the context, criteria, and scope of the AI project for you to identify the relevant risk and treat the risk appropriately. Yeah. So I think that's how I would see that being achieved, hopefully in the not too far future.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up like this fairness and like that just 99% accuracy, even though it sounds so high and statistically it is a, a insanely high thing, is not high enough.
Exactly.
And so my father works in healthcare, and so they developed this AI model to try and help treat diseases. And when they were building the model, they didn't take into account any of these ethnic or racial data points. They didn't take anything in. And then when that was applied, it was found that their model was very biased.
Yep.
So would you, and we can kind of get a little read on this from your previous answers, but do you support more anonymization where data points like that are excluded to promote fairness? Or do you think that that should be included and accounted for in these training models?
Two words: awareness, participation. So I think people need to be aware that, especially when it comes to healthcare, data points are important. At the same time, diseases do not choose who to infect or who to kill, right? So by having the awareness of that kind, right, and have people willingly participate, right, will kind of really bring about both the fairness and the ethical part, because you know that viruses do not choose who you are. Look at COVID-19, right? Do they say that you are Jacob? I shall prevent, I shall not attack you, right? And I'll attack ended, right? Because his I don't like him, right? So it's kind of not, it doesn't work that way. And it's not just about healthcare. How about climate risk? How about weather, right? How about, your day-to-day transportation, right? A vehicle, electronic vehicle doesn't care who you are. They just fulfill their role of bringing you from point A to point B safely. So why should we exclude, right, all this data? And perhaps I feel that in this landscape, a lot of people are not aware. If I'm not spoken about that example, and a lot of software engineers were very proud that they hit 99.9% accuracy. While the policymaker will be saying that, hey, this is nonsense, right? So the policymakers, the governmental officials, and the data scientists and software engineers has to be aware, coming together and participate in order for the issues of ethical behaviors or judgment being put in place by machines. You see, at the end of the day, systems and machine are fundamentally developed by humans, right? And we have to be fair to our data scientists. It's a tough job, right? And our politicians as well. Why? Because human to human, we are still facing the issues of biasness, facing ethical issue, right? I really hope that one day when machine and human has that respect and harmonious kind of framework, it will help the human race as well. Yeah. So that's something that I feel strongly about.
Okay. Yeah. And so kind of jumping off how the challenges that both data scientists and politicians face, what are some areas that you think need to be focused on more from like a risk management perspective around AI development and training?
Yep. I think one of the key things that I really feel strongly about is awareness, like I mentioned. There is a lot of voices around we should educate, right? But let's say if you do not know the benefits of mathematics, and I force you to take your timetables, I force you to do your algebras, and you do not know why you're doing this or calculus, it's just not sustainable. So I feel that there is one more steps prior to education, and that is to generate the kind of awareness and participation, right? And then form strong education at the C-suite level and even the board of directors level, because a lot of the risk appetites has to be defined by the leaders, right? I can be a very strong data scientist or software engineer, right? But the processes, the framework that I'm building upon is what my leader has cascaded down for me.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can't bring about the involvement of the leadership, right, in the right direction, that's where I feel, the entire train will not be moving as fast as we wish to, right? So yeah, so the one thing that I really want to focus on is create a lot of awareness, between what we just spoken, even in this interview. I hope anyone who picks this up, take that one step, talk about what I share today. That would be a very good start of creating awareness, and later on, education will make sense.
Okay. Yeah. I always find that even like in books or textbooks, like I'll have a really hard time reading a math textbook because I'm not interested in it, right? It's not,
Yes.
I don't care,
Yes.
And so whereas something like for my internship, we picked up virtual threading, and that I found really interesting. And so then of course, it's a lot easier to learn. So I find this point about like generating that interest. And I hope that's something we can do today. So if some of our audience does find some of the points you've made interesting, do you have any resources or articles that you'd like to point them to, or that you use to kind of gain that education that is so important, or that awareness?
I think I'm someone who likes to synthesize, new way of thinking. And I do read widely. I will say actually every piece of resources out there, has been educating me or creating the awareness for me, right? But what I essentially always look out for is from a risk management framework, right? Because the thing here is risk management has been around since human being has been in existence, right? And risk management will not go away even after we are gone, right? As long as there's humans, right? The elements of risk will always be around. So where I really educate myself more into is really into the mindsets of leadership, right? Risk management practices. In RIMAS, we have some of our council members sitting in the technical committee of ISO 31000. So again, 31000 is a risk management guideline, as some of the audience might know or might not know. But it is interesting framework that is not mandatory, not like ISO 9000 or 27001 if you're in data center. But it has that generic framework that is so important across different industry, different businesses, or even different subject matters. In today's call is AI, right? So it's so fundamentally powerful that we can synthesize essential I think way of managing, say, the creation of an AI project, the implementing of an AI project, right? How should we bring about the cultural and the human side of things together, right? That's one part. How do we integrate that, right, And how do we have a structure and comprehensive plan? How do we customize it, to that subject matter? How do we include and be dynamic at the same time? And finally, how do we make available the best information? For all this that I mentioned, it's all about continuously improving. You don't do risk management one time. It's a continuous effort. So these eight items that I've just mentioned are actually found in the ISO itself, and all are here to protect your value and also to help you to create the value, say the AI project that you're working on. So I would say I read widely, so I can't really think about something to refer everyone to. Anything that you see in the web, on the books, I think they are really resourceful. I think the recent book that was that I came about was the Ethical Machine, I think by Reed Blackman, right? So these are all very forward-looking, people who are already looking at what could cause AI to go into another winter, and it's actually the ethical part of So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I find the point about we need to constantly reevaluate our risk, right? It's not something that is set in stone and then we can just drop it, right? That is, I think, something I don't always think about personally, even in my own life, managing risk, right? Is it we need to constantly reevaluate, and with that, the same thing with AI and AI ethics, because we are developing at this insane rate.
Indeed, In fact, there's a lot of researchers currently focusing on AI ethics because it's still a field where we are lagging of information and data, right, to form sufficient baseline, right, for us to say provide with the software engineers, say a golden number for them to measure upon, right, or to be able to determine whether that accuracy or loss of their algorithm has it been inclusive enough and dynamic enough. So these are some of the I would say existing works that I also do with a charity organization in UK called For Humanities, where we really focus a lot on creating this awareness of what we call infrastructure of trust, right? So there are 5 pillars to that, and that is, of course, trustworthiness, bias, privacy, ethics, and cybersecurity. Because we really feel that these 5 pillars right now are not coming together, right? And we need to look at them in a very holistic manner, right? In a very structured and comprehensive manner, like I mentioned, and continuously improve it. So those are some of the efforts.
Those are some great pillars. Is there anything else you would like to share before we wrap up here with our audience?
I would say, I'll quote from Peter Drucker. You can't improve what you don't measure. Right? I think this quote has been used many times, right? And it has still been a very successful quote, right? Because measurements really becomes an end in and also of themselves, right? And we want to start looking at how we can better manage, right, our risk on a very continuous basis. And for us to do what? For us to do what we call risk treatment. So a lot of audience may do risk analysis on a day-to-day basis, right? Even in your AI projects, but you did not know that you're doing it. So I usually have an acronym that I help my learners, right, to remember. So I call risk is an art. So AART. So it's either you choose to avoid the first A, or to accept the risk, or you will reduce the risk, or transfer the risk. So this is what we call the risk decisions, right? And these decisions can't be made, right, if you do not have those elements of reporting, monitoring, consultation involved. So I guess that's something that I hope to leave with the audience in this podcast. And once again, thank you very much for inviting me.
thank you for coming on. And that acronym is certainly catchy and useful. So thank you for sharing your insights with us today. And
No problem.
for more content, subscribe to Engati and tap on the bell icon to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders around the globe, just like Andeed. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you with a new expert very soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.